We live in a day and age where there is a lot of information out there. With things like Google and YouTube, one search is all it takes to figure out anything about anything. But in a lot of circumstances, like currently with the pandemic going on, there's a lot of value in having a singular version of the truth to streamline a process. In our project, which we labeled Changemaker, we found that to be an extremely valuable lesson. Our team was pretty compact, but that was really awesome because we had a lot of time to collaborate with one another. And thanks to our mentor, Dr. Dan Conway, we had this awesome opportunity to learn blockchain technology and data science along the way. Now, a traditional studio semester looks like a team being formed by a project lead recruiting, and then they find this problem they want to solve. They're paired with a mentor, they conduct this discovery process, they use that data to create a prototype, they then put the prototype in the hands of the user, they get feedback, and they reiterate until they have a final prototype. Now, we did this process until about mid-March when we had to move home and start working remotely, and we decided that we wanted to maybe change our project to reflect our current circumstances, so we did that. Um, but to understand how we got there, I think it's important to first talk about the project that we were working on at the beginning and how we got to that point. And so we kind of started with this blockchain location tracking project, and it was a really awesome opportunity to look at this problem. How might we create a location tracking system so that different companies have a single version of the truth? And the way that we did that is we wanted to create an interorganizational or permission database for companies to share without risking their private information. This basically means that maybe a retailer and a distributor have one single database that they can look at specific information without risking putting all of their information out there for the other party to see. And when we talked to industry leaders, the feedback we got was that this kind of item would be really awesome for low cost items they want to track in the store that maybe putting an RFID tag wouldn't make sense on. It was a promising way to track fresh produce from the source. If some chicken had salmonella on it, you would be able to track what chicken farm the salmonella came from and all of the other items that were contaminated. And then it would also reduce settlement fees on data discrepancies, which basically means if a distributor says that they sent you a certain amount, but you say you received a certain amount, and those amounts are different, instead of sending that to a lawyer to figure out how to settle, you have a database that you can look, and it actually just tells you the right answer. And so we got to where we were working on that, and we realized that we wanted to shift our circumstance, but that we wanted to maintain that the single version of the truth was pretty valuable. And so what we did is we started looking at current issues in the world, and we found that there is a major PPE shortage. And that was a pretty big, frightening thing for us to realize because we're makers. We like to prototype, so we wanted to be able to help. And so we started looking into the numbers, and according to the World Health Organization, we're in need in the US of 79 million gloves a month, 89 million masks, and 1.6 million goggles. And that would call for a 40% manufacturing increase across the board. And we like to make prototypes. We manufacture things at home. And so we went to talk to other makers and figure out what they were doing. And what we found is that the maker movement was a very viable source of micro manufacturing some of this PPE. Etsy, which is a DIY marketplace, had 3.3 billion in gross merchandising sales in 2018. And on top of that, we live in a culture that is really custom to DIY content. There's a lot of open source sites and there's a lot of video tutorials. So we talked to some makers, and what we got back was that there is a lot of people that are wanting to make these PPE shortage items, and there are a lot of people that are doing it during the COVID virus, but that a major issue is that there's not a unified front. There's not a single version of the truth similar to the blockchain project. And even people like Dr. Dan Conway, who I'm sure did not spend their free time prior to the virus creating John Deere masks, are willing to take the time at home to create these items. And so we came up with this question: how might we help makers make during a pandemic? How do we produce this unified front? How do we find a single version of the truth with all of these open source sites, all of these relief sites? And what we decided we wanted to do was create Matchmaker. Matchmaker is a really awesome website that allows makers to figure out the best possible thing for them to create during the crisis to help with the PPE shortage. All they have to do is fill out a quiz pretty similar to BuzzFeed, like what Harry Potter house I should have belonged to, except this time you're answering if you have a 3D printer and how many materials you have on hand. And when you do all of that, it's going to output things like what is the best possible PPE for you to produce, what your output should be with the time you put in. It'll give you a file, and it'll also give you the best possible way to do it with your machine. And it'll also put you in touch with local people in need for you to become a distributor to their hospitals or facilities. And we also went ahead and we created a page that shares data on the impact makers who use the site have. And that being said, we think that our solution of Matchmaker was a really awesome way to create a single version of the truth so we could unify the maker movement in stopping the PPE shortage.